we have these two players here, Michael and Marina. And so recall that Michael's going to have these two choices here. He can either take both white marbles or take the blue marble off the table. And meanwhile, Marina is going to write either white or write blue on a piece of paper. And here in this chart, I've represented both players' possible payoffs. So what Michael has follows the blue here, or what he can get. So that's going to be either $2. If he chooses to take both white marbles, he can either end up with 2. Well, no matter what, he's going to end up with 2. And meanwhile, if he takes the blue marble, he can either end up with 1 or end up with 3. And meanwhile, for Marina, if she writes white, she'll get something in this column here, which is going to be either $1 or $2. And if she writes blue, she's going to end up in this column here, getting either $1 or $0. Okay, so now if you think about it for a moment, let's think about what Michael would, or what would be the best choice for Michael. Now, obviously, the payoff that he's going to most desire is this one here, where he gets $3, but he can't choose which outcome he gets. The only thing that he has control over is what selection he makes over here between these two. So rather than just sort of hoping that he gets a particular outcome, it's better for him to look at all of the possibilities for either of his two options. So obviously, if he chooses to take both white marbles, he knows that he's going to end up with $2. And if he chooses to take the blue marble, then he's going to either end up with 1 or 3. So one reasonable way to think about what's going on for Michael is to consider what's the worst thing that he can end up with for each of his two choices here. So we'll call that the minimum possible payoff he can get. And so obviously, if he chooses to take both white marbles, the minimum thing that he can get, and also actually the maximum thing that he can get, is $2. But if he chooses to take the blue marble, then the worst outcome that he can get is getting the $1. So his minimum, if he chooses to take the blue marble, is going to be ending up with $1. So one good strategy for him is to choose the outcome that's going to give him the highest minimum, or the outcome that's going to guarantee him the best thing if he ends up doing, poorly, you might say. So no matter what happens, he's going to at least get $2 if he chooses to take both white marbles, and if he chooses to take the blue marble, then the worst thing that he can end up with is $1. So one reasonable strategy is to take the option, which of course is going to be this one here, that maximizes that minimum payoff. And the name for this strategy is maxi-min, and this is on page 239, this quote I pulled out. Okay, so this strategy just is choose a strategy or choose the option. It kind of goes back and forth between strategy and the choice itself, but so we want to choose the option that yields, for Michael, the maximum of these minimum values. Okay, so if Michael's following the maxi-min strategy, then he's going to choose to take both white marbles. So he's going to end up with something here. Well, he's going to end up with $2, either this outcome here or this outcome here, which of course doesn't give him a chance of getting the $3, but it guarantees him that he won't end up down here with only $1. Okay, so now meanwhile, Marina has to make her own choice, and she can think through this problem in the same way. So we'll just write minimum here. So if she chooses to write white on the piece of paper, then the minimum thing that she can end up with, the worst thing that she can end up with, is going to be the $1. So she has a possibility of getting $2, but she can also end up with just getting $1. Now, meanwhile, if she chooses to write blue on the piece of paper, then she can either get 1 or 0. So her minimum possible payoff, if she chooses to write blue, is going to be $0. So if Marina is following the maxi-min, then for her, the better choice is to write white. That's going to give her the maximum of these two minimum payoffs. So if she wants to maximize that minimum, then for her, she would choose to write white. However, notice also on page 239, right there on the next paragraph, that Appia looks at a slightly different strategy for Marina to follow. It's actually going to end up being the same, work out to the same choice for her, but here we have the mini-max strategy. And in this strategy, what Marina wants to do is minimize the maximum payoff that the other player, that is Michael, can end up getting. So if we think about that, then we want to look at, for each of these two choices that Marina has, what the maximum that the other player can end up with. So, all right. So if Marina chooses to write white on the piece of paper, then we see that the best that the other player can do, the best that Michael can do, is going to be $2. He might only get 1, but the best that he can do is this. Meanwhile, if she writes blue on the piece of paper, then the best that Michael can do is get $3. That is, if he ends up down here. So if Marina is trying to minimize the maximum payoff that Michael can get, then she wants him to get this payoff here. She wants to make this choice here that limits how well he can do. If she chooses to write white, then the best that Michael can do is get $2. And of course, since this is a zero-sum game, the greater the limitation on Michael's payoff is, it's just going to maximize Marina's own payoff. So these two strategies here that we're examining, or these two, the information that we're examining here, actually, you can see it sort of works out to be the inverse of each other. So, but in any case, the way Appia describes it, if Marina is following the mini-max strategy, that is limiting minimizing the maximum that the other player, that Michael, can get, then she's going to choose to write white. Okay, so Michael follows the maxi-min strategy. He takes both white marbles off the table. Marina is following the mini-max strategy. She writes white on the piece of paper. So both of them, or well, the outcome for both of them is going to be this one right here. So Michael's going to choose, or Michael's going to end up with $2 rather. No choice there. He gets $2 and Marina gets $1. And this outcome that corresponds to Michael following the maxi-min strategy and Marina following the mini-max strategy, we call the equilibrium point. So this outcome is you can think of as the best possibility for both of them. If either one of them deviates from the strategy that gets them this outcome, then they're not going to do any better, and there's a possibility that they might end up doing worse. So if both of them are rational players, then both of them are going to follow the strategies that we've talked about, and they're going to end up right here.